Welcome back, everyone, to Citywide Blackout, your home for music, movies, and more. My name is Max. I'm the host of the show. But this episode, we're not going to be talking about the usual thing. We're not talking to a writer. We're not talking to a musician. We're not talking to a filmmaker. Today, we are talking about what it means to survive the loss of a loved one to suicide. My next guest, she lost her husband Larry years ago to suicide. Nancy Caissie joins me.
Hi, Max. I want to thank you, first off, for having me. It means the world to me to be able to use your forum for such an important topic. And, of course, I wish we were talking about something different. But, again, I am so extremely thankful for you giving me this opportunity.
Of course, of course. Why don't we start by sharing with the listeners your story?
Sure. So I was married for what would have been almost 10 years to my high school sweetheart, Larry. And we had two sons together who were ages 3 and 6 at the time of his suicide. And we had a long, at times tumultuous relationship. Looking back now, I know why, because he struggled deeply with depression and anxiety. And back, 10, 15 years ago, it certainly wasn't anywhere near what it is now as far as people talking about it, the stigma. I certainly have seen, there's not such an attachment with the stigma of it anymore. But at that time, being young and in our 20s and having kids and, you're just kind of getting by in life and trying to figure it all out. But he struggled a lot. And he would be laid off in the wintertime from work, and I know he struggled with depression. And of course, I did everything I could to help him through those long winter months. And you can only do so much nowadays with the healthcare system. It's, you can't drag somebody anywhere, and you can't, beg them for information that you're trying to get. But I did all I could as a wife, and who loved her husband more than anything in the world and wanted the father of her kids to be okay. And so it was a long road. We had been together for a total of 17 years since high school. So he was pretty much all I knew, and I was all he knew. And it was a struggle for him. And again, it wasn't until his passing that I really, really understood why. But on May 28th, 2011, we had been separated for about a month. I took my kids to my parents' house, again, 3 and 6 at the time. And I got a call early on a Saturday morning, and I went over there and tried to run to the shed. Thank God I was stopped. But and just like that, he was gone. And yeah, so it was shocking. It was he wasn't the type that threatened it at all through our 17 years together. He certainly struggled once I left. I think a lot of people can look to the wife or the spouse or and place blame where it shouldn't be. But I did leave to protect my children. And again, he was doing drugs to try to ease his own pain, but I couldn't be around for that. And so it came as an absolute shock. His suicide did. And even to this day, it'll be 9 years in May. It's still as shocking as it was back then. So.
Nancy, first off, I'm so sorry about this. I actually met Larry before he passed, and he seemed like a really, really chill guy.
You did meet him, and I love that, because I feel like, you're not only some voyeur, you've always been so kind to me. We worked together previously, and you had Larry, and, people always say, how could I not see? How could I not? You can't see the inside of somebody's brain. You can't see the inside of somebody's broken heart. And when people would ask me, why, is it because you left him? Is it this? I would always say it's so much more than that. It's a pain that isn't put on another human being. It's an internal pain that, again, with men these big strapping tough guys who don't want to say I'm hurting, or I don't understand why I'm feeling this way. Or I remember him calling me at work, and it was really once we had our sons that I really saw a change in him. And his father was not around I've always struggled with how much to share of his story because, it's his story. But to me, the big picture here and what my goal is to tap into those people that are embarrassed or ashamed or don't want to talk about it. If they only knew how normal their feelings were and how okay they are. And I don't care if you're, a 250-pound, wrestler or you're a little tiny old lady, like it doesn't discriminate. Anxiety, depression, mental illness, it does not matter. As we all know, we hear this all the time with famous people, the Bourdains and the Kate Spades and how much more does it take to realize it doesn't matter what you have and what you don't have. It's what you carry inside. And I want people to feel comfortable enough to say, I am hurting, and here's why. Because when people ask why he's gone, it's not because of me, Max. It's not because I left. I've known that since day one. I loved him his entire life. Larry is gone because he didn't know what to do with his pain, because nobody held their hands out to say, listen, this is okay. And back then, I didn't even know, Max. I've learned so much in 9 years. It's not even funny from people. And I'm as much as I hate being in this position, I truly, truly believe that I am here because people need to hear certain things that they're not hearing. And that is that it's okay to be in pain and you must feel to deal to heal. That has been my motto for 9 years.
After Larry's passing, did people try to get in his head? Did people try to themselves to kind of understand what happened?
I think what happens so often with suicide is that you don't have, obviously the person is gone. So you cannot ask a single question. And for me as his wife, nobody wanted to understand it more than me. I knew again that he struggled. I knew that seasonal depression came in and out. But if you told me, 5 years before that my husband would be gone at his own hands, I would never have believed you. So yes, people started to put pieces together after the fact. A lot of them blamed me. Like I said, you go through that. You go through that as the standing, living spouse. I see it all the time, that there is nobody else to blame but you. And whether you left or whether you were still there, it's like this, why didn't you do more? Why didn't you, know? And again, I even understand that looking back. I mean, I had his own family. They didn't know he was battling drugs. They didn't even know he was really battling depression. Because again, you have so many of these people they don't talk about it. And that's half the problem. They're not willing to be vulnerable and to, acknowledge that pain. So yeah, he had friends that were, I saw some, introverted behavior in the end. And I know that, most of his friends told me that he was, going around saying that he paid his truck off and that he was getting everything in line and that he was going to, buy a big house. So even in his last days, he was trying so hard to keep it together and to make it look like everything was okay. And, again, we were together. It would have been 10 years we were married. Leaving him was the hardest decision I have ever made. And I get asked this question all the time. If you knew what you knew now, would you have changed a thing? And Max, the answer to that, I wouldn't have changed a thing on my end. The only thing I would have changed was his decision. And as we know, I can't change somebody else's decision. So I protected my boys. I had to. I know that I did everything I could for him while he was here. But, in the end, yes, people are pulling straws, trying so hard to figure it out. I was with him for 17 years. And Max, I don't even know if I really knew him. It's truly, it's mind boggling to think that, you're laying next to somebody that in the end, life became too much. And I remember saying to him at one point, Larry, promise me you'll be here when our kids graduate. And he looked at me and said, I promise. And that was 2 weeks before he was gone. So I don't know. I can't answer. I don't know what happened. I don't know. But I, again, have never put that on me. And as a human being, I beg anyone listening who has lost from a loved one from suicide, that guilt and it's such a useless feeling to hold on to. It has never done anyone any good. It is not something that people do to you. It is something that they battle within. And I just, if there's any point that I get across right now, it's that one, because it's the only reason I'm sitting here able to smile, and my sons are doing well and all that. So that's something I want people to really hear.
Yeah, I think the biggest question that gets asked when someone does take their own life is, why didn't I see it coming? Why couldn't I see the signs? And it's like you said, you can't see inside someone's head. And you said Larry was in a really good mood in the days leading up to his passing. He seemed hopeful. He had plans for the future. And then all it takes, really, though, from what I've seen, it just takes one bad day, one bad moment.
It's those moments that, again, I'm almost 9 years out. So those 9 years have been so informative, and I've learned so much. Unfortunately, it's not what I want to be learning, the subject I want to be learning more about, but it's my life, and I want to, anyway. The one theme that you hear over and over from people who attempted and failed is they are so grateful that they failed. And that gets me to my core, because if you can get through that one fleeting moment of pitch blackness, that light will come back. But it's about getting these people past that pitch black moment. And for my husband, drugs did not help at all, because at the time of his death, I begged for an autopsy, and little did I know that one would never be done, because his manner of death was determined. And I called the coroner, and they said, I'm sorry, we don't do that, because we already determined his cause of death. So I had all these people who, his own family, oh, he didn't do drugs. He was full of them. That night of his death, he was on drugs. And that is another thing that, I think people truly need to understand, is when you are high and you are essentially out of your mind, these decisions that you are making are forever. And you leave your children and your spouses and your parents and your siblings in this trail of fury, when so many times I truly believe that in that fleeting moment, you will be okay, and you can get your breath back and find that tiny little glimmer of light, Max, that is always going to be visible if you keep looking.
One of the things you mentioned earlier, I want to touch on this a little bit, is that it can be hard to admit that you're going through this kind of struggle. And we've definitely stigmatized that admittance that, I want to kill myself, or I think about killing myself, or I think I'm going to kill myself. When people say that, this shouldn't be like a shocked reaction. It should be, okay, sit down, talk to me about it. Given Larry's family, given Larry's his life, was that an option that someone was going to do that? I mean, do you think he felt that he had that outlet, that it existed for him?
I think it wasn't until we had children, like I said, that he started to fear the repercussion of that honesty. Mm-hmm. Oh, in other words, he was a breadwinner. I was the stay-at-home mom. I had the kids. We bought a home. Life is expensive, Max, as we know. He had such pressure on himself as a human, like most of us do, right? That's life. But he knew that by admitting that feeling, and to him a weakness, let's say the word, to so many people, anxiety, depression, mental illness is a weakness. Even I, who have, again, sat around for 9 years in this, took me a long time to say, I know what anxiety is. I know what it is to feel sad. I know. And this was me, tooting the horn 5 years ago, trying to get people to be honest, and struggling in my own a little bit to say, you know what? I don't know why I'm feeling this way. I don't. So he, I think, on top of being the man of the house and the dad and the husband who had to go out and make the check, he knew that by going to the doctors and you know, again, he drove a truck, Max. You can't be popping the medication that they're giving you. It's not okay. It's not okay to be treated and to take these treatments and to you know, it's hard enough to struggle, never mind risking possibly your job or the fear of, you know, someone finding out and them saying, you know what, I'm sorry, I can't have you drive this huge 2,000-pound truck while you're on you know, your antidepressant that's making you feel. He was afraid that his life and our lives would be altered dramatically if he was to lay down and say, I need help. And Max, I like to think you know me, right? I'm a caretaker type. There was nothing I wanted more than to help the man I loved through this. But again, like I said in the beginning, you can only do so much. And I, to be honest, didn't understand all this either. It wasn't until he was gone that I even understood what anxiety, depression, what any of it. I didn't even know what I was looking at when I was looking at my own husband. I didn't know what it all meant until he was gone. And again, I never blame survivors ever. I mean, if you love somebody, to me, that's all you can do. But like you said, if someone's threatening their life, and I'll tell you what, Larry died on May 28th. And that year on Easter, and it was in April, I don't remember the date, but I'll never forget, it was the first time, and he texted to me, or maybe paged me back then. He said, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to take my life. And that was the first time in 17 years that he had ever alluded to ending his life, ever. And a month later, or ish, he was gone. So did I, like you said, you know, if you hear that, take that seriously. People, again, you will get those people who throw it out there like it's nothing. And they obviously have never dealt with suicide in their life because they wouldn't say something like that. But there are also people that are screaming for you to say, hey, wait a minute, that's not okay. And I did all that I knew to do at the time. You know, I did. I rubbed his head. I called, I made appointments. I bought him books. I did. And it wasn't enough. And I think we also, survivors, have to give themselves a break in saying that, you know, we're not put on earth to save lives. We're here to live our own and certainly be there for people who need us. And I will always, for the rest of my days, do that. But I will never, ever take responsibility for someone else's choice, ever.
Exactly. And I think to anyone listening, if you've lost someone to suicide, it can be very easy to take on the blame. Like, I should have stopped this. I should have seen it coming. It is not your fault. It sounds a little cliche, but it is true. It is not your fault. You're not to blame. I think the stats do say that people who want to do it, they'll find a way. It's not your fault. It's not your fault, Nancy. It's not. I want to ask you, though, after Larry passed away, were you able to find a support group or people that you could talk to? Was it difficult to find folks that you could open up to about what happened?
I love this question because when we talked about doing this podcast, you had mentioned kind of referencing some of the support groups and things like that. And it took me back because I have come across, I did go to support groups. I had actually met two women who lost their husbands the same way in my town within months, who I gravitated towards so incredibly and got me through the next couple of years. Janine and Michelle, if I can just shout them out, they will forever be my closest friends in spirit. Because there is nothing quite like that, you know, being able to relate to that. And to answer your question, I did go to therapy. I felt like I was going to be my therapist's dinner talk. I felt like even she couldn't, her mouth was dropping. She couldn't believe it. I had asked her myself if she had dealt with suicide firsthand. She had not. So for me, the hardest part after his death was finding the place I felt home. I felt lost everywhere I went, whether it was a support group, whether it was a therapist, whether it was my own family. Because you know what people don't talk about either is Yes, was my family incredible? Oh my God. My friends and family, I wouldn't be here. But at the same time, that's a funky, funky thing to go through because you've got a son in law for 17 years, you've got a brother in law for 17 years. You're the wife. And that's a very different navigation to have children than it is for, say, my mom, my dad, my sisters, my brother in laws, my nephews. My nephews were 18 years old. I'm sorry, 15, 14 years old when they lost their uncle. Every single person's journey with this is so tremendously different. But you almost feel like you are, you got everyone on your back because this was your husband. This was his suicide. And not only that, but I had my boys, Max, 3 and 6 years old. And at the time, as selfish as it may sound, I couldn't do everybody's pain. I had to focus on me and my boys. And that not only do you lose your husband, but you lose a lot of relationships. You also don't want to really thrust yourself back into the life that you once had, the 17 years, which included your own family, Christmas, Thanksgiving. I found myself wanting to do anything but what I always did. And my poor family's like missing me. And, why don't you want to? And it was just too hard to be in the place where we always had been. And so there is a selfishness to I think any grief, but especially with a suicide, because not only are you really grappling with the fact that this person is no longer here at their own hands, this person that you loved, but you're sort of feeling the responsibility of everyone's pain. And that's a lot to take on. So
9 years later, how do you feel about it?
First of all, I like welled up a little because it's not like a total ton often that people just say like, how do you feel 9 years later? So thanks for that, Max. How do I feel about it? I still feel shocked that he's gone at his own hand. I don't think I will ever not feel shocked about it. I feel proud of where my sons and I have come because it is a very, very, very difficult journey to navigate, especially when there aren't a ton of books on the fact that you can come out of it and be happy and that you can come out of it and be joyful and you can come out and love again and all these things that, I remember looking in libraries and online and I just never found the book that I needed to give me hope. It just felt heavy. It was so heavy. And I'm not a heavy person. I'm a light kind of girl. I like hope and I like joy and it was dark and it was bleak. So 9 years later, Max, I feel proud and I feel happy and yeah, I would say proud. I just feel really, really proud because it's been a long road and my most pride comes in my sons who are now 15 and 12 who literally have no idea. They are the reason I am here. 100%. Not here. I'd never not be here on earth, but here with so much love in my heart and so much joy in my soul. And I'm proud of them. So I feel proud 9 years later. And I feel also real quick, super proud of the way that this country and hopefully the world has opened up the discussion. And it's the stigma, like we said, it's there, but it's lifting and it's getting more acceptable to be struggling. And I think that in the long run is huge for suicide rates as a whole. I think being able to talk about it is everything.
I definitely think the stigma needs to end because a lot of people say that, first off, if you're like a practicing Catholic, suicide, you go right to hell. People will be called cowards. They'll be called selfish. They'll be called destructive. But to call that person selfish, to say that they were a coward, I think insults their memory. They were in a place that few of us can actually imagine, and we should not disparage them for their pain.
I agree totally with that statement, and I'm so glad you touched on it because that has been I'm going to be very candid with you, Max, as a wife and as a mother of somebody who, again, left at his own hands. I have used the word selfish a few times. Absolutely, I would be a liar, which I am not, if I did not admit that. So I will admit that to you. But I will always clarify that by saying I am not mad at Larry Taylor. I am mad at his illness. I am mad at the liar that told him that this place was not worth it and that this place couldn't bring him joy and that his children, people always say, oh, I wish I could have done more. And I say to them, if his children and me, his wife, were not enough to stay, nothing was. There was nothing that you could say or I could say that was going to keep him here. A coward, you go to hell. I had family members who said, oh, he'll rot in hell. My own again, it's everybody has their feeling and everybody has a right to those feelings. But I'll tell you something, unless you have dealt with it firsthand, meaning either, and especially really, you can't speak to it unless you felt it. But being someone who has loved someone so deeply for so long, who struggled, in that moment of black, they truly believe, I think, that they're doing those they love a favor as well. And this, to anyone out here listening, right, Max? People out there who are listening, who may struggle, who may have these black moments, whose heart and mind tell them there is no point anymore. This is too painful. This hurts too much. Why sit around in that? Because if you don't, you will never, ever know what is on the other side of that. And I promise you, at some point, and it may take a while, and it may take a lot of uncomfortable times, and it may take a lot of doctor's appointments and a lot of medication to get the right one, but eventually you will look back and you will say, I am so glad I did not listen to that black demon that tried to tell me that my life wasn't worth living.
Exactly. That's it. It takes work. It's
takes
not
a
easy.
lot. And I always say, if I can live through the suicide of my husband with our 2 sons and have black days just like you've had, Max, and moments like Larry had, I'm not saying I can relate to that mindset of not wanting to be here, but I've been pretty low, going through something like that. And if I can do it, then anyone else can do it. Mm-hmm. And if I can get up every day and face my reality, then anybody else, in my opinion, can too. If they have the guts to say, hey, I am hurting and I need help, because the help is out there. I know this the mental health care system, Max, it's a nightmare. We can't sit here and pretend like, oh, go to your doctor, everything will be great tomorrow. It can be a total fight for your own life. But if you're not going to fight for yourself, then who the heck is?
And while we're on that subject, people should know also there's other resources available too. It's not just a matter of seeing a therapist. It could be talking to a priest. It could be talking to the police. It could be talking to the firefighters, because they're all trained to deal with these kinds of situations. So if you find that, okay, your health care is bupkis, it's not doing for you, go to the police and say, I'm going to hurt myself. And they will help you.
Max, in 2020, there are literally more ways than ever before, whether it's a text, whether it's a phone call, whether it's the police, the fire. I mean, you can literally drive up to your convenience store and look at the clerk and say, I need help. And someone's going to get you help. It's that bravery in saying it and admitting it and saying, you know what, I'm going to be vulnerable enough to say, I'm hurting. And until we get people to feel comfortable enough to do that, we're never going to get anywhere. People have to feel comfortable enough to say it and to be candid about their pain, and to know that, to me, strength lies within those who are willing to admit their pain, not with the ones walking around with their chests stuck out saying, oh, I don't deal with that. I've even seen firsthand people say, oh, what do you mean anxiety? Get over it. Again, may they never have an anxiety attack. May they never feel the feelings that these people are struggling with on a daily basis. But until, again, you're walking in those shoes, you cannot pretend. Just like you said earlier, you can't pretend you know what cancer feels like. You can't pretend to know what it feels like to, have diabetes. Stop trying to pretend like you know what it's like. because until you literally are in the soul and heart and mind, even being married to someone for 17 years who I ultimately lost, I still can't sit here and tell you I know what it was like for him, but I can tell you, all I can, being so close to it, which is it wasn't comfortable for him to be open and honest. And 9 years later, my prayer is that in his death and in my talking all of these years about it, that people have said, you know what? I don't want to leave my kids and my spouse like he left Nancy and those kids. I don't want to leave them, again, selfish. No, the act, it is a lone choice though. And that is sort of a fuzzy line. Selfish. No, mental illness is selfish. It's a selfish beast, within itself. But these human beings, these God's creations, they don't want to die, Max. They don't want to wake up every day wondering if they can, conjure up a fake smile so that the neighbor doesn't think that they're, manic. Like it's real. And I want people to really start to get a tolerance for it and an understanding. That's what I want.
Let's talk about you in the here and now. You've remarried. You have now 4 kids.
Can you believe?
I can only imagine the chaos engine of that home. Was it hard to take that step to go back into, dating and meeting people? Did you have to get really sort of like pushed out the door?
This is a whole nother aspect of it. Larry, I had met at 17 years old. And while he was the love of that part of my life, that's how I always explain it, right? It was hard. It was hard. And I always want to watch how I say this, because I wouldn't trade my marriage with him or my children or any of it for anything. But I can't saint the marriage in his death. I can't pretend like everything was perfect, and it wasn't. It was difficult being with someone who didn't even know his own struggle, right? So it was very early on in sort of the mental health discussion back in 2008, 2009. It really wasn't as talked about. So it was a really hard courtship with him, because a lot of it was spent sort of Dr. Philling him and trying to get him to be happy. And so I always knew, I had left again a month before he had passed away, the drug use, all of these things. Like I knew that I couldn't keep my children in that. I knew that, but I never stopped loving him. But I knew the minute I had found out he had died, that my life wasn't going to stop too. And that I deserved to love and to be loved, and my children deserved it. So for me, the judgments from people as far as, dating and how could you, move on. And so he passed in 2011. And a year later, I met my now husband, who I've known actually since we were 10, 11 years old, from town. And he's a policeman. He's my hero. People say he saved me, and I say no. I say that we saved each other. But he just came. He just appeared. It was like there was no method to it. I wasn't really looking. It happened, and it was hard. I mean, we didn't introduce the kids for months on end. They were little, and you want to be careful. They're in their own, confusing time. But we married in 2014. And April Fool's Day of 2015, I went in and had an ultrasound, and they said, guess what? There's 2 babies. And I said, oh, because I thought I'd give him one. He adopted my boys, our boys now, Corey and Jacoby, my oldest boys, took his name, and he is dead. And we went on to have, like I said, a set of twins. I'm a twin myself, which is crazy. They say it skips a generation. That's a lie. But we had Brooke and Brody, they'll be 5 in November. And Max, I'm telling you, I don't know why I deserve the life that I live. And a lot of people think that sounds crazy, but I truly feel like and I haven't cried the whole time, and I don't plan on it, but this subject here will really, I don't know why I deserve him or my beautiful children or any of it, but I truly am so in love and so at peace and so happy with my life right now, truly.
Well, Nancy, I do think you deserve to be happy. I think everyone deserves to be happy. Do you ever have moments where you think, I shouldn't be here, I don't deserve to have a great husband, these wonderful kids, because of what happened with Larry?
Never.
Good.
And I know that not everybody can say that, and maybe some people find it odd, I don't know, but I truly believe that the only reason I have come so far and my boys, have done so well is because I've always believed that I deserve what everybody else does. Why wouldn't I? I loved my first husband. It's all I ever did. If you ask anyone who ever knew us, he adored me. This wasn't a love loss. This wasn't, I'm going to take my life because I don't want to be around her. This was a guy who literally loved me and these boys so much that his pain, he wanted, I think, to spare us all of it. And again, if you're listening, that's not how that works. I'm going to say it again, Max. That is not how that works. You stay here and you fight through it. But no, I never question. Sometimes I sit back and I say, how did I get, 9 years ago, I remember thinking, I'm never going to smile and mean it, ever. I'm never truly going to enjoy. I was 32 years old when I became a widow. I said, my life as I know it, like I'm done. Like, that's it. I'm never going to be happy. And now when I sit in it, I don't say like, why, Nancy? You don't deserve. You know what I say? Thank you to whoever is responsible for all of this. And I give myself a lot of the credit for that. And, I don't do guilt. I don't do it. I believe that Larry is smiling down, literally saying, that's the woman that I love. And that's the woman that has strength. And that's the woman that I have children with. I think the hardest part for me, and it will always be truly the most gut-wrenching, is our children's milestones. Those are, I will never not sob my face off. My oldest son just got his first job, and there are times that I, will sit in the car and watch him walk away, and I am so angry that every joyous moment is shadowed by that pain of, he should be here. He should see these amazing boys and how well they are doing and just how incredible they are, right? I mean, when you make children with people, with a spouse, you want them to be there. And again, my husband now, I mean, I wouldn't, he's the most incredible, but again, that's their father, and that's the man who created them. And you just had hopes that he would be here to see those things. So that I don't use the word hate often, but I hate that these great defining milestone moments are always sort of shadowed in a bit of sadness. But I always try to end it with just the powerful sort of image of him looking down and saying how awesome his sons have turned out. So,
And I will tell you this right now, he's looking down from heaven. I don't care what anyone says. I will challenge anyone to say it to my damn face. He's up in heaven. Because I think if God is going to take anyone in, it's going to be someone who's hurting.
I couldn't agree with that more. And, do the people say he's looking up? I've heard it all the time. To them, I say, shame on you. Because if you are a believer in God, and I'm not this religious, I don't pretend to know much about any of it, but I know that we are all God's children, and every single one of us deserves to be welcomed when we get there, regardless of how we got there. And he may have had some time to, have to sort of sit in the middle and work some stuff out. I'm not even saying that maybe he didn't have a little bit of like a probation time, but I have no doubt that he is up there and he is smiling his humongous smile and super, super proud, especially of his incredible son, truly.
Okay. Nancy, as you mentioned before, you have your two oldest sons. How do you talk to children when this kind of thing happens? Is there, I mean, what was the struggle or the challenge with telling them about this, even as they get older too?
So 3 and 6 at the time, I'll never forget sitting on my parents' porch, and it had happened on an early Saturday morning of Memorial Day weekend, and my parents were away at the time, and it was just me at their house, and Larry had taken the kids earlier in the day. So they actually stayed with my sister for 3 days while I tried to figure that out. Well, I tried to, and it wasn't that I obviously wanted to see them and hold them and squeeze them, but I myself had to get myself together enough to get them home and to figure this out. And 3 and 6, we sat on the deck, the pool deck, and told them that Daddy was in heaven. And I'll never forget, they both were like, okay, we're going to go on the swings. And they ran off. And I remember looking at my mom like, what? Like, it can't be like that easy, right? Well, that night at bedtime, they're both, and I'm sorry for this visual because it's a painful one, but they're both on their knees with their arms up in the air, reaching for heaven, saying, Daddy, Daddy. I mean, it is like nothing you can truly imagine. It's worse than any Lifetime movie you've ever seen. It's, and I've never wanted pity or any of that stuff, but it is not for the faint of heart. And as, months went by and years went by, and, with the help of the male men in my life, my dad, and just really incredible people that helped me during my weakest times. It did take a village. It did. But at the end of the day, you're the mom, and you're home every night with those 2 boys who are trying to understand something that you can't even understand. So, as they got older and sort of able to understand a little bit more, it was always that they knew that Daddy chose to go. That was something that, I learned early on through therapy and through, groups for kids, that you don't want to be a liar. You don't want them to look back and say, heck, that's as hard as it is to say certain things. The truth relative to their age was very, very important to me, and how to do that. And I would do this thing where, you would take your hands and sort of show them this was Daddy's brain, and kind of scatter your fingers all around. And most people's brains, just sit together, but Daddy's, was moving a lot. And it was so, pictures and it was hard. I mean, again, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. Like, I'm just a mom who's trying to, again, understand something that is impossible to understand and get my babies through it. And that job will never be over for me. People think, 9 years, great. I am now looking at a 12 and 15-year-old who, as I was coming down to record this podcast, kissed me and said, Mom, I'm so proud of you. But they also are trying to understand suicide and what it means and what it meant and how could he have loved me and he's gone, and all of these things that even again as adults we fight so hard to understand. So as a mom, my job, and I've always said, I have Brooke and Brody who are 5, and then I have the boys, and it's almost like 2 phases of parenting. I have my boys who it was a little harder, right? It was a little harder to, and I look at Brooke and Brody who have their dad and their mom, and so that in and of itself is sort of, my little Brookie sees pictures of the boy's father, and who's that? And so there are so many dynamics that I will forever be handling and walking my babies through, and they're just my world. So I guess when you give it everything you have as a mom, anything is possible, even this. And as hard as we've had, it's funny, like, again, funny, no, but I'll have really bad days, say, right? I still have them. And then the boys are there for me, right? And not long ago, I think it hit them for the first time that it was my loss too, that I'm not just the mom, navigating them through their dad's loss, but it was my best friend. And I think as they've gotten older, that hits them too, that the pain that I went through and what that must have been like for me. So it's an interesting journey, but it is a journey that we will forever together be going through. And one thing, Max, we are closer, I think, than any mom and sons could ever be, I must say.
Nancy, no doubt there are some listeners now who want to talk to you, people who want to say something. Someone out there is hurting. They don't think that tomorrow matters. They don't think that they matter. They think the world is better off without them. What do you say to them?
When you say that, and when you ask me that, what I do literally is I envision Larry before it was too late, right? Like if I got that chance to say something to him, like I do now to listeners and maybe somebody who's struggling. And there's all the, cliche things, right? You're worth it. You're somebody's everything. You are the reason somebody smiles and somebody's heart is more full because you're in their life. And again, a parent or a sibling or a spouse burdens aren't in the form of people. They're not, people aren't burdens. And if you're out there feeling like you're just this like waste of space, this sad, heavy, you bring nothing but pain, or like, I'm only saying it because I know, because I've heard people say this to me. And people have come in my inbox and said, Nancy, I'm not feeling life. I'm not, and all I can do is say what I've said for 9 years, which is not only give yourself the chance to feel that joy that makes life worth living, and fight through the thoughts that you are anything but a gift here, no matter what that means, no matter how much you're struggling or suffering, it will pass. Suicide is final. There is absolutely no way of going back. And again, what we started off from with the beginning, I heard the stat today on Dr. Phil, because during this pandemic, Max, you better believe suicide rate is going up. So I'm glad we're talking, and I hope we're helping. But you truly just have to know that out of all of these people that have tried and failed, I think it was like, and I don't know for sure, but it was up there. The percentage was so high that every single one of them that failed their attempt was so thankful that they failed. And I think that is the most important thing to get across to people, because if you go, and I will also say, and I'm going to say it because I think it's important. I don't think people say it enough. Don't do this to the people that love you. Don't, and again, some people say, it's, I'm not saying it's selfish. I'm not calling anyone coward, but do not put this pain, do not transport your pain onto people that you love. Because I'll tell you what, while I love my life and I wouldn't literally trade any of it for anything, the pain I carry every single day from that kind of a loss, it's something that I literally wouldn't wish on anybody, because it's heavy and it's sad, and it's, suicide to me it's sad. There's nothing more sad than a life extinguished way too early by someone's own hands. And I guess the final message truly is that you can hear it a million trillion times that you matter. And I know that it won't truly resonate until you believe it, until you believe that you matter. And my suggestion to you is that you fight whatever it takes, medication, therapy, reaching out, any of it, to get to the point where you realize that you matter.
Nancy, thank you so much for sharing your story. I genuinely hope it helps people, that there's a listener out there who is really thinking what they're going through. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I think it's very important that we talk about this, that we end the stigma, that we end the name calling, that we end the negativity for people who are going through this very hard time.
I want to say thank you so much for opening up, what typically is fun and light and music filled, and, to talk about something so serious but so important. And again, if one person is listening and says, you know what, maybe I can see past this dark moment. Maybe I am important enough to stay. Maybe I do matter enough. I can't thank you enough for the opportunity. And I really hope that we've reached even one person.
I know we have.
Thank you, Max.
And thank you.